online course share has been really helpful in my efforts to remove barriers for students and move them to completion. So I want to spend a little time today talking to you about that. One, because it was completely new, it was innovative, something that Benedict College had not quite considered before, right before COVID, thinking about online education. We were just, quite honestly, not strong in that space. Again, HBCU students, come to our campuses to see you, to be in your classroom, to sit on the yard with you, to see you in the dining hall. And so this thought of, kind of online education and whether or not our students would do well in that space, I think it's something that, because of enrollment push and all of that, I mean, we've been thinking about it, at least at Benedict, but hadn't quite taken tremendous steps to add that, right, to one of our modalities. Funny enough, right before COVID, though, we started really investing in the training piece of it. So, who can do this well, right? If we want to grow ourselves and expand course options and modes of delivery, what kind of training do we need? So the summer before COVID, Benedict College got together and built out an e-certification program. So they recognized very early that if we're going to be in this space, we at least have to have some training, right, to get faculty to where they needed to be to deliver this well, and to think about, different pedagogies and thinking about, SLOs and how those change in the online space or not. And so pre-COVID, the summer before, Benedict actually launched its e-certification program along with a very small group of online courses just to get its feet wet in the space. Fast forward a semester later, we were interrupted in the middle of March, like the rest of you, and had to make that shift literally in the moment, like overnight, it felt like, right? How do we transition? We had some work that we had done in the training space, but all of these courses now needed to turn over in a different way. And so, that same semester, I had started talking a bit with Acadium, this platform that powered online course share. What was this about? We knew that we needed to get in the space, we needed to be strong in the space, but we also knew that we weren't trying to send students away to other institutions and not have them come back, right? And so how were we able to, use the power of a consortia, for example, to trade seats, right? To send students to courses where they stood up, right? We saw them as BC equivalent courses, but not lose that student and stay connected at the same time. And so Acadium, I started kind of having these real intense conversations with that group. And I noticed that there was tremendous potential for our students to get the courses that they needed that perhaps we weren't offering that semester for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe we didn't have a faculty member to teach it, or maybe the demand for the course was so low that the course didn't make, right? A host of reasons why we at Benedict may not be offering the course, but it didn't stop the fact that the student needed that course to progress in her course of study, right? So like I had this conundrum, I was going back and forth with Acadium, and I want to share a little bit today about how we were able to radicalize our advising model by integrating online course share. So, as I said, we were in this space thinking about how to integrate online course share to help us with some of the challenges that we had in the advising space. And, this partnership was really about connecting Benedict with other institutions who were like-minded, right, to enhance success, boost degree completion, address the inefficiencies, again, some of those, availability of courses and that kind of thing, support the academic strategies, of course, and then increase some revenue, right? There was the option here for us to not only keep students in terms of retention, but to earn some revenue, generate some revenue by becoming possibly a teaching institution. So I'll talk a little bit kind of about that. So again, course supply is top of mind here. The demand for those courses, thinking about, enriching the curricular. Perhaps there were areas where we had not quite been as developed, but we recognized that this was a pathway that students were really interested in. We were, getting rid of some majors, right? Dissolving some majors because of productivity in those majors, but we were also introducing new majors. So, when you are building out a program and it's a new major, you may not have all of the faculty yet to teach those courses, but the students are here. The industry that they're interested in says that you need this, 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 this. How can we, in the time being, right, figure out a way to not hold the students up? And so enriching curricular was really attractive to us. And then, of course, just eliminating the scheduling challenges. Synchronous course meetings were becoming increasingly difficult. Benedict College is a small liberal arts college in Columbia, South Carolina, about 82% Pell dependent. So we don't even say eligible anymore. If not for these funds, these students wouldn't be in school, right? And so the need to work is real. The need to work is real. And so those synchronous meetings, were actually popping up more and more on my radar as a roadblock for students, because they were literally, trying to sign into courses or go to class for 15 minutes, then leave and go to Walmart to start the shift, or signing in from the break room at Walmart, into their, there was just the need to work was predominant. Right. And so that was something that I was really interested in, the asynchronous option, because it added flexibility, recognizing all of the responsibilities that students have. And unfortunately, for our students, being a student, they don't always have the luxury to do that first, right? There are all of these other responsibilities, caretaking, need to work. So for me, having the added flexibility, I thought was really helpful. So, quite simply, how course sharing works. Through course sharing, institutions can access, and you all can kind of take a look at this too here, access high quality courses from like-minded institutions that fill the gaps in current capabilities. So first is the assessment, back to Dr. Orr's presentation earlier, the assessment of kind of where we are, what are our course needs, and then how can we identify courses across consortia that stand up in our respective programs. So here's some key benefits. Here, we actually get to award institutional credit, and those grades earned through a consortia class actually calculates into the student's GPA, right, at Benedict College, unlike transfer courses. So if a student transfers a course in, right, that grade doesn't calculate and help a student, for example, let's say who is in SAT trouble, right, or an athlete who needs that GPA for eligibility. Transfer courses won't count. However, in this particular partnership model, the grades actually count into the GPA. So that was huge benefit there. Expanding that catalog, again, thinking about courses that are not in rotation often. How can we proactively identify those courses and find course equivalents across the consortia so we make sure that we don't interrupt the student's progress? Financial aid can be applied here to pay for these courses. So if I enroll a student at Kaiser University, that student can use her financial aid to pay for that course. So the student does not have an out-of-pocket expense. And, that is, again, back to our demographic, top of mind for students, the funding piece of this. And then it allows the student to stay connected to a home institution. So unlike a transfer situation, we technically approve those transfer courses, right, based on a syllabus, right, looking through a syllabus and reading some kind of course description, but very little information available to us as a home institution that would indicate what kind of learning experience our student is going to have at XYZ institution, right? But through this partnership, there is an open dialogue. There is a connection between the home institution enrolling the student at, let's say, a Kaiser University or a Bay Path, for example. We can actually reach out to those teaching institutions to ask questions, to make sure that, ADA accommodations are honored, to make sure that online academic support by way of maybe tutoring is extended to our students. There is this communication line that is established between the home institution and the teaching institution that we don't always experience, right? When students go out and take courses at other institutions in like a transfer scenario. So we're able to keep a pulse, right, on how our students are doing at these various institutions. And, again, utilizing the academic support piece on the side of the teaching institution coupled with the support services at the home institution. So it is very much a wraparound support model because, again, we're in dialogue. I'm going to let someone in here. We're in dialogue not only before the course starts, but we actually maintain that communication throughout the students' matriculation, right? And so if there's a question about, for example, attendance, that institution can reach out to me or engage a support team at Acadium, right, to reach out to me to say, hey there, we haven't seen Sean in 2 weeks, what's up? So we don't have that kind of relationship in transfer scenarios, and I really appreciate that because, again, working together, it shows a really high level of commitment to student success, and that's what it's about, right? That kind of intrusive advising as you go all the way through. So, a couple of benefits here to the home institution, in this case, Benedict College. We eliminate the hassle of managing transfer credits. We are able to expand our, courses available to students. Again, the GPA benefit, huge. That is big there. We have some insight, again, on course quality and delivery. The open line of communication is unique and special here. And we have greater control over courses that students are taking off campus. And so working with deans and chairs, those courses are pre-approved. And so the pre-approval process, they're essentially vetted. And so the chair then puts the stamp on it and says, you know what, this class is equivalent to English 101 here. And so it is not a decision that is made in isolation. Team of people who look at these courses to decide, is this a good fit for our student and does it stand up in our academic program? So some of the special use cases, I've been involved in this partnership now since January 2020. So right before the pandemic, as I mentioned. And I realized that various institutions lean on the consortium for a number of different reasons. For Benedict College, here are some of the special use cases that I found to be particularly significant. One, it's the issue of course rotation, right? Sequencing issues. If a student fails a part 1 of a course, do we have to wait a whole nother 2 semesters for that student to access that course again? Well, with course rotation being what it is, having this repository of courses that you can tap to keep students on track was especially helpful for us. Also with grade recovery. Right? So because those grades transfer in and calculate in the GPA, they're transcribed as Benedict courses with a special designation in the section. And so on the transcript, you don't see Franklin University listed, or you don't see, for example, Indiana Wesleyan listed. You actually see Benedict College with, again, the course equivalent, right, number and title with a special section that denotes that this student took this course through the consortium, right? So the grade recovery potential here is priceless. This actually helped us to energize summer enrollments. Before our partnership with Acadium, summer enrollment was dead, did not exist. That just was not a term that Benedict had invested in. And so all of a sudden now, having this, this plethora of courses available and Summer Pell, right? So be clear, Summer Pell was very helpful here in thinking about, not only which courses to pair up for students, but how students would afford it, right? So that was huge. So this brought a whole new energy to summer enrollment that Benedict College had not previously seen. During this season, a new MBA program was launched. Again, we're talking about, thinking through new majors, new programs, and staffing that, right? What does that look like in terms of faculty? And Benedict was in the process of literally hiring in that season, trying to figure out, how do we build a program? How do we build a faculty? Well, to get these students started, we were able to use this consortia to launch the first cohort, right? And borrow an accounting course from a partner institution, again, to keep students on track while Benedict was putting together its faculty team, right? So that was really helpful. Again, in that same vein, the new majors, we introduced cybersecurity and justice administration. Our earlier conversation about Black Lives Matter and the kind of social political landscape was really important here because the student demand was tremendous. Like, students wanted to dig deep. They wanted to know more about justice administration. They wanted to, think about career readiness. And the goal here, of course, again, with our demographic, it's learning for learning's sake, right? But we're a liberal arts school. But the real kind of practical concern for students is, how am I going to change the trajectory of my life and my family's life by getting a good paying job? Like, I need this degree to translate to, financial security in a way that perhaps had not been realized. And so the work piece, the employability piece is driving a lot of this. It really drove us to introduce new majors, but now we had to figure out how to put students through a relevant and rigorous program. So for the new majors, we were able to use courses through the consortium to help us, again, while we were working through staffing, et cetera. And on the other end of that, thinking about assessment and those majors that just were not productive. And I mean that in the most respectful way, right? So no diss against the mathematicians or the historians in the house today, but in terms of students graduating through these programs, student demand, employability, we just found that these majors were not turning out the kind of numbers that were important to the president and her cabinet. So, we made a decision to dissolve the majors listed here on the screen, but we still had students who were identified in those various programs. Couldn't just say, hey there, you have to change your major as a junior. So we had to come up with a plan. What can we do to kind of teach out, right, these majors? Again, making sure that the students' degrees were awarded on time, but at the same time, making sure that we can protect the integrity, right, of that program and partner with some schools who were doing this really well. And so here we were able to find a host of courses, pre-approve them, enroll our students so those students could graduate on time. It wasn't their fault that the college made a decision about, their major and the decision to specifically to dissolve it, but we still had the responsibility to see them through. And so the consortium was fantastic because in that moment, it was about a contingency plan and we were able to lean heavily on the options there. So here's a little bit about kind of where we are to date. We've completed 207 enrollments. And we have 27 live enrollments this semester for fall. But near 80% pass rate. So, immediately what comes to mind when I see that is, oh, Black kids can learn online. Black kids absolutely are capable, are able, are interested in online learning, but they need support. And we know the kind of public narrative, right, that is out there about our kids and the online space outside of social media, right? So, if you're not surfing and if you're not, watching Netflix, is there anything there in that online learning space for Black kids? Absolutely. But we also recognize that, we have to be honest about the challenges that they face. And so, I think this high pass rate for us is the evidence to suggest boldly that, this is not about learning ability. This is not about student preference. Yes, we know why they come to HBCUs. We know all about the kind of essential experience that our institutions offer. But at the end of the day, we have to graduate them and we have to prepare them to be competitive beyond the college, right? And so we, again, a lot riding on this. The stakes are really high. So we're really proud of this pass rate. And I'll talk to you a little bit about why I think we were able to achieve and maintain that. Coming into Acadium, I can be candid in saying that there were a lot of things that had not yet been created around policies and practices. I mean, assets, like I was looking for the student tracker document to monitor progress, didn't have that. I was looking for language. How do we integrate this into our course catalog? How do we get faculty to buy in so that they don't feel threatened by sending students away to other institutions or worry about job security? I needed faculty buy-in. I needed some talk points there to help me kind of massage, right, that relationship. I needed students to know what they were getting into so that they didn't feel disconnected from Benedict during this time, but that they had a really clear set of expectations on paper, and they could walk through those to make sure that they were in fact ready for this online experience. I needed an onboarding session because, again, throwing a bunch of emails out to students just didn't seem to be enough. We needed to be able to talk through this. I needed to be able to orient them in a way where they felt comfortable and they were assured that Benedict was not leaving them, but that Benedict would be with them. And all of the services that they have access to at Benedict would follow them. And I needed to know, how were my students performing in this class beyond a letter grade? Right? I needed to know specifically what were the strategies that were super effective for my students, what didn't work, right? And hearing from the student in her voice or his voice, what this experience looked like, what it meant for them, what should be, reconsidered, how should we adjust? And so even though they were taking course evaluations and completing that at the teaching institution, at the home institution, I wasn't privy to that information, right? So I was looking for a tool. Hey, Acadium, where is the tool that's going to help me to capture this data? Didn't exist. So I went through and I said to myself, okay, let me make a list of all the things that I would have appreciated having at the start of this relationship. And I talked to Acadium quite honestly about it. And I said, you know what? It would be really helpful if you could put together a toolkit. And they were like, well, what would be better is if you could help us, because you're now the practitioner. You're the person on the other end of this, right? Enrolling students. Students are talking to you. They're not going to go to the support person at the teaching institution. There's no rapport there. There's no relationship. They're going to come back to you, Jamila, because they know you, they trust you. Can you help guide some of this work? And so I started to give share some insight as to how I thought this could be better, right? How could we strengthen this? How could we talk specifically about student success through advising strategies? I thought about the work with Complete College America. Some of you may be familiar with that group, but we certainly lean on a number of their advising strategies to help us do the work that we do at Benedict College. So then I kind of use that as a lens, right? So, if you think about proactive advising, how were we able to determine the course needs, right? So, looking at performance, midterm grades were helpful. Final grades for block or mini terms at Benedict, they have a kind of block 1, block 2, or fall 1, fall 2, if you will, schedule. How can I look at those grades in advance to predict, right? To project what would we need? And not only what would we need, how many seats? Because then that drove how many sections, right? And then guess what? If I enrolled over 10 students in the consortium, hey, I deserve a special section. I deserve an exclusive section because, now I can create a learning community of Benedict students, right? And what would that look like? So to all this kind of work going through my mind, but looking at the performance piece here, I was able to with some level of accuracy here, kind of project what we would need and then bump that up against what was planned for the course schedule for the upcoming term. So working very close with the registrar here and the deans and chairs to anticipate the gaps. Also, I mentioned the sequence courses, right? For students who were joining in January, kind of mid-year, what would they need, because they weren't with us the fall before, what would they need to get caught up, right? Is it that, college experience one course? And, for a course like that, you have to take one, at least at Benedict, before you take part two, right? So again, the sequence piece. Can I get them caught up at another institution and maybe they can take the two concurrently, right? I just saw a vast space for us to be bold and to be different. And so I just kind of jumped right in, and I had the support of my president and my vice president for academic affairs to do that. And so not all people are blessed to have that kind of, transformative leadership, like unafraid. It's never been done before, but we got your back. And if you fail, just make sure that you minimize the collateral damage here, right? But I mean, really, I really had an open lane to pilot this partnership. And so I looked at the sequence courses. I looked at the bottleneck courses, the courses where, we're offering 4 sections, but I really need 7. What are we going to do, right, in that scenario? I thought about grade recovery, especially for the athletes, and how many people were up against not being, eligible, possibly not being eligible to play. That mattered. And so these special populations kind of came to mind, and I thought about the needs of those students. Again, knowing your students is just so important. It's been a theme today, and I'm so happy because it's knowing them beyond the roster. It's knowing them beyond the ID number. So I don't enroll ID numbers, I enroll people with varied lived experiences, with a host of responsibilities. And I'm able to use that information to make informed decisions about how I enroll them, where I enroll them, and when I enroll them. Right. And so this special population piece is key because not every approach is going to work. Right. So my MBA students, completely different population there. My student athletes, I know what they're concerned about. They want to play. They want to play. My graduating seniors, really cool example here. I want to just take a moment to talk a little bit about them. I had students who needed a course that wasn't going to be offered until the fall. So they were scheduled to graduate in May, this past May. So that would have been spring 2021, but they were short 3 credits. And those 3 credits, that course wasn't going to be available until the following semester, right? Which would be technically now. And I thought, just what a sad piece of news to give these students. Like, I'm sorry, you can't walk. We'll have to see you in the fall, and we'll delay your graduation by a semester because we just don't offer the course. It just felt so lame, right? For me to say that. It felt like there has to be another way. Not only am I holding up graduation, for many of these students, they had job offers that depended on them having their degrees conferred by a certain date. So this was now impacting their whole life plan. And I said to myself, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. Benedict had a policy. If you don't finish all of your credits, you don't complete all of your credits by X date, you cannot walk. You cannot participate, right? And you can't march. Okay. Wrote it out, put together a rationale and said, this is not right. This is not student-centric. This policy absolutely doesn't center our students and what they need. And went to my VPAA and said to her, listen, I have a way, I have an idea. I think we can find the course that we need through the consortium, enroll the student, right? So that we don't hold the student up, we don't delay graduation. Well, there was a problem with that. Benedict's courses ended, let's say, April 15th. Well, the course that you're proposing, Jamila, through the consortium doesn't end until May 1. Commencement is May 8th. So we can't approve them because we won't have the grade in time. This is another opportunity. Let me write another policy. Suppose I have the student screenshot the grade book from the course to show that they are making satisfactory progress, they're in good standing in the course, right? On the last possible day. So if it's April 15 that we need to clear the senior list, what have you, I'm going to have the student provide a real-time snapshot. Where is the student right now? And will you, Benedict College, allow the student with that piece of information to participate, knowing that we will get the grade, let's say 2 weeks later than what Benedict expected? I had 6 students in this scenario. And again, the support of the leadership, priceless. They allowed me to implement a new policy. And here we have early walkers, right? These are students who, you know, again, but for a course end date, I mean, that just couldn't be the reason that we were holding them up. They didn't have time or money to come back and see us in August. They needed to move on to this next chapter. And so that's just one really, to me, special example of how we were able to solve challenges proactively with student concerns, needs as central, right, to that thinking. And so the consortium, if I didn't have that option to pull those courses, those students would be enrolled right now at Benedict. And to me, it just felt so inefficient. It felt wrong. These students had, you know, studied through COVID, and not all they wanted to do was walk with their class. And we were able to put our minds together and make that happen. So I'm really proud of that example. Staying on track here, supporting student progress. Again, I talked about the summer term. That was totally underutilized. I mean, we didn't have a plan for it. We didn't have faculty who wanted to teach in the summer. So again, using the consortium, now we have a robust summer enrollment, and we're able to use summer Pell funds to help these students pay for these courses. I want to talk a little bit about the training here, because part of the lift at Benedict, to be quite honest, integrating this partnership into the advising practice has been about the training. Like, okay, Jamila, so you've spent some time with Acadian doing this work, you've been troubleshooting, you've been writing new policies, you've been testing theories and collecting data. Who else is going to do it? Because now what's happening is the demand for consortium courses is growing, and there's only one me. And my colleagues in the HBCU space know, I mean, we wear a whole lot of hats. But for something like this, because the value is so high, it's like the interest just started to do this, and I felt like I wasn't able to keep up with it all. So we talk about capacity, which is, I think, another important kind of sub-theme of the day. A lot of great ideas, but you need people to push that. You don't just need anybody. You need people who have a working knowledge of enrollment management, academic affairs, student affairs, because this advising work, as we've talked about earlier, Jennifer kind of set the tone today, it's holistic. It's holistic. So who else are we going to bring on to the team? So I talk about advising kind of broadly, but then the academic advisors here, we don't have a centralized advising model. So we use faculty advisors here, and athletic coaches and student support specialists. And so how was I going to bring these people onto the team and train them so that they can understand, the power of the consortium? Again, not as a replacement for the courses that we offer at Benedict, but rather, an effective alternative, right? A complement, if you will. So the advising piece here and the training has been top of mind for me. And that's ongoing, because again, as the strategies change, as the teaching institutions continue to grow, there's over 300 teaching institutions in this course share space to date. as they continue to grow and as we continue to deepen relationships with particular institutions, this need for training is ongoing, and it's a consistent part of what we're doing now. Again, because we realize where we need some extra development and where we can lean on other institutions in a partnership, again, to serve students. That is the goal. That is the work. So how are we expanding course schedules and offerings here? Again, a couple of really unique situations. I talked a little bit about some of them. Let me just mention here the stop outs, adding that flexibility. So many students, and I'm sure you can share in this, so many students will drop their entire schedule because of one course conflict, right? Like they are on the border. They're literally like, I can't do it. This is too much. You can't work this out for me. I'm like, oh, how are we going to just withdraw from school because one class isn't working out? There's got to be a way that we can figure this out together. So the stop outs, we've reduced the number of stop outs because we've added this asynchronous option. Those who are on academic or judicial suspension, again, thinking about the policies and how archaic some of these policies are. So if you're on suspension, we tell you, we'll separate from you, student, for a year. And you're supposed to get your act together in a year, disconnected from the college, so that you're strong enough to come back and persist. So what we found is that putting students on suspension and dismissing them from the college ultimately was not helping them to get their acts together. They didn't come back stronger and more focused. They didn't come back at all. So the punitive piece for me in thinking about SAP and thinking about, suspension just didn't feel right. It felt like that year away was not helpful to the student. It certainly didn't help the institution. And there had to have been a way where we can think about keeping those students in the fold, choosing the right courses for them, courses that they could earn grades for, and those grades could help the GPA, get them back up to the 2.0 so they can be back on campus. And, so again, the punitive piece of some of these policies for me, it felt outdated. And it felt like we were making it harder for students. And so if we're about removing the barriers, we can't at the same time be creating them, right? And so that didn't feel right. I talked a bit about the seniors and this professional course series. I'll just say here, a number of certificate programs that we've developed during this time around DEIJ work, around technical skills. So again, utilizing the partner institutions to help bring those to life for our students. This was another avenue where we saw tremendous potential, and we begin to, tap into some of that now. And of course, this goes without saying here, the low enrollment courses. What do we do? How do we help those courses to make, right? If we become a teaching institution, we can invite enrollments in and help, affect that bottom line. Right now, Benedict is a home institution, but we've just signed on to become a teaching institution because we recognize as an HBCU, there's some things that we do very well. And when we talk about curricular offerings, there's some specializations and there's some faculty with some, expertise that we think would serve, a host of students, not just Benedict students, right? So who better to talk about DEIJ work than an HBCU faculty member? Who better to talk about cybersecurity, than our faculty member who has, built this particular model to help with security in different software spaces. Who better to talk about, the work of Blacks in sports than someone in our sport management department? So for us, this kind of next layer, this next chapter for us is becoming a teaching institution and really building, relationships with students from HBCUs and non-HBCUs, because arguably those who need courses, the most with respect to DEIJ work are students who are not at HBCUs, students who are part of institutions where, the kind of diversity that we're talking about may not be a part of their, college culture or fabric. And so to me, I think showcasing, highlighting the strengths of HBCUs through the curriculum, that's a really exciting part of this kind of next phase for us moving into the teaching institution piece. And I'll just kind of stop here for a moment. I've shared a lot of information, and I was going to actually give you a preview into how my messy tracker is looking right now. But what I do just quickly is I kind of go through and I monitor every single enrollment. I track if they're first generation college student, if they're a student athlete, are they working full time? Are they a student parent? Their SAP status. I look at FAFSA information, right? I look at whether or not this student is in a special club or organization, is a student in the band, for example. Someone talked earlier about band and how demanding it is at HBCUs. I concur. So I try to get as many special identifiers as I can, because that helps me, again, to make more informed decisions about where I should enroll the student. For example, if a student is struggling and has struggled in math, a 4-week advanced math course in the online course share space is probably not a good idea. I need a full term course for that student, right? So it's more than just plugging, students' names with courses. It's thinking about the length of that term at that institution. It's thinking about synchronous versus asynchronous. It's thinking about the cost of textbooks. It's thinking about, support services on the other end of this, right, at the teaching institution. It's thinking about start and end dates for those courses. So this is not just something that we kind of, quickly plug students in. We're not just filling seats. We're actually thinking about each student one by one, and we're looking at all this data. If I show you my spreadsheet, it'd probably give you like a huge heart attack, but showing across the board how all of these layers of identity play into student performance in courses. And so, I will say right now, I mentioned the near 80%. I've actually gone through every single semester since spring 2020, when we launched our first enrollment. And I've looked at the pass, fail, and withdrawal rate. And I can actually track, for example, in the semester where we used CARES Act funds to provide laptops, the pass rate increased by 11%. Why? Because I was removing the barrier. I had funds now to connect students with laptops, right? So that was part of the readiness piece that I hadn't necessarily thought of. Like, okay, you're in college, you have access to a laptop. Not so much. When we closed, there were so many students who were dependent on computer labs on campus. So sending them home, in some cases, in many cases, meant that we were kind of cutting them off, right? Not because we wanted to, but that was the situation, cutting them off from access to resources on campus. How was I going to fill that gap? The minute I was able to provide technology subsidies to students, I noticed, again, that increase in success. I noticed that summer Pell, for that summer enrollment, that made a huge difference. Also launched this past summer a summer tuition grant assistance program. So we were using, again, CARES money to pay for courses. And summer Pell is helpful, but it doesn't always cover the full cost, right? So we were using Pell, but we were also, making that up. Whatever the balance was, we were making that up through institutional funds afforded to us through the CARES Act. I noticed then huge jump between summer 2020 and summer 2021 in terms of not only enrollment, but the pass rate. We were removing barriers. And so I could go way down a rabbit hole with all of the data that I've been tracking, but I just wanted to kind of share today a little bit about this really cool partnership that I'm so happy to be a part of. And again, thinking about student success, removing barriers, and reimagining what advising looks like at HBCUs. I'm so happy to take questions and comments, and I'll stop sharing my screen here so we can kind of have a real talk moment, as Jennifer likes to call them, because I've shared a lot of the wins, but I've also been very transparent too, that there were some things that just did not exist that needed to be in place, and I had the bandwidth to create, and I had the bandwidth to test some things out. And fortunately for me, I have a president who is like a troublemaker in the best possible way. She's about like turning this thing all the way over. Like, oh, it's a table, we're supposed to sit down. Okay, I don't think so. Because it's about reaching students and remaining competitive. And, this thought of students disconnecting or detaching through COVID, she was like, well, we shouldn't be worried about that because they should have never left. So like, how do we continue through our retention efforts to bring fresh ideas to the table? So I'm really privileged to sit in this space. I thank you so much for listening, and so happy to open up the space now so we can talk a bit more.
So I came in a little bit late. For those who don't know, my name is Ray Moon, academic advisor at Central State University. So I did catch the last part about the supporting progress. One of the things I would like to add to that would be to for advisors to collaborate with like our career services department, and also collaborating with our on-campus counseling department as well too. So I know we spoke a little bit earlier about like the holistic approach too. And I think one of the things that normally we see at Central State University is we get a lot of students who are, of course, first generation students, but we also get a lot of students who have that trauma barrier too, and allowing them to have access to those, training advisors on how to notice the signs of a student struggling, notice the signs of students who may not have a direction to go in, that, career services is available. This is what we could do. So I do like that part as well too. I did miss like the first half of it, but those were some of the things that kind of stood out to me as well too. And I think it kind of talked about that institutional trust that we spoke about earlier.
Right.
And I think if the students actually trust the institution that, hey, we're here to care about you, and everybody here has been trained the same way to take care of you within their departments, I think that'll kind of keep the student morale up too. And I literally just had a student who came to my office yesterday, like around 5 o'clock, right when I was ready to go. Mm-hmm. And he was dropped from all his classes because of a judicial suspension. And I looked at it and was like, well, what did you do? And that was kind of like the first thing I asked, like, so what happened? And, it was one of those situations where young people who indulge in smoking, it just happened that way. And then I started to think about it like, so we're going to send you home because of that. You know what I mean? And I know it's the illegal aspect and everything like that, but kind of like you said, what are we sending you home with? Are we sending you home with, hey, well, you can go home, but you have to take this class to stay engaged? Because he was shocked. Like, I didn't even know that I was getting suspended. Like, I had a judicial hearing, but I didn't know this was going to happen to me. And now once he found out that this happened, I remember leaving the building and watching him walk across to go see our dean of students. And the look on his face just felt like, I don't know, it was bad, and I had a bad feeling. So when you said that, if we suspending students or students are getting suspended, what are we leaving them with? And I think that's a major component that ties into morale, institutional morale, that taps into retention, the whole nine. Like, we can develop as many programs as we want to get students to come back. But if we are in the role that, kicks them out, we should be leaving them with something to kind of reel them back in once that judicial standing or that academic suspension is up. So that last part was incredible to hear. So
listen, and it's not to say that some students don't need to go home. Some students need to go home. Okay, so this is not about, me advocating that we just dismantle the judiciary process, but it's just, again, maybe level setting expectations
Mhm.
because, the likelihood of them coming back, I think we need to look at that data and we need to think about, at the end of the day, what the priority, right, for the institution is.
Exactly.
And at Benedict, it's about enrollment, but it's also about making sure that students are in programs that will position them ultimately to be competitive um, beyond the college, like it's employability, and
Mhm.
and we have to be paying attention to that. And so, again, with the dissolving of the majors, I mean, that was huge. That was huge on campus. A lot of hurt feelings, a lot of hurt feelings.
Mm.
But we made room for, again, thinking about student demand, we made room for some other areas, some other disciplines that, students have responded so well to. And if you think about the cultural moment that we're in, this is their civil rights movement. And so for them, even as a recruiting piece, it
Yeah.
is so good to be able to see that, we are constantly shifting and bending so that we meet students where they are. And, we commit to the kind of development that, again, this is about changing, this can change their whole trajectory. It
Yeah.
often does, and their families, future. And so we're talking about high stakes here. Thank you, Ray, for not only your comment, but hanging with us all day. Because you've
Yeah, I'm
been present.
here. And
You
it's
have been
homecoming
present.
weekend.
We see you and we hear you, and thank you for
No problem.
taking some time with us today. Any other thoughts, questions about CourseShare, questions about how we adopted CourseShare at the college, questions about, or comments, reflections about how retention and advising are working at your respective institutions? All right, Jennifer, thanks for your question. Can you give any quick tips on technology selection? What do you wish you had known then that you know now? Technology selection, can you just clarify for me, Jennifer? Are you talking about platforms or hardware?
Servers, platforms, it's a cottage industry, and there are so many choices that it can become overwhelming. And so just some quick tips of how to center ourselves and approach a very complex and crowded market for those kinds of options.
Yeah. So with respect to CourseShare, there are a number of entities jumping into this space now. What was really impressive to me is that Acadium fostered the kind of communication with their support team where you felt like you weren't just using a product, but that you were connecting with people, right? And so the responsiveness of that team, not only in real time in terms of replying to tickets and resolving matters, but the responsiveness to all of the suggestions, because I was a pain. I know they were like, here's Jamila again with another comment, or, this language is problematic, or the assumption that students have, $300 to pay for a textbook is rooted in privilege. I mean, I was calling them out respectfully to push them to recognize that they had an awesome opportunity to change the game for, for students at HBCUs. But first, you had to understand who our students are and what they needed. And they were so willing. I mean, I can't state it enough. They were so willing to not only meet with me, but to allow HBCU partners to be co-creators, right? And I think that's another theme of the day here. It's not about us looking at HBCUs and the institutions and the policies and the practices and the people and the students in this kind of fishbowl, and then making decisions about best practices outside of them, right? So it's taking the HBCU and moving them from the subject, the thing to be studied, and really recognizing the awesome talent and strength to be, co-creators in this space. And Acadium, in my experience from day one, they were not only willing to hear me out, but they wanted a relationship that extended beyond the enrollment. So I didn't feel like they were trying to sell me something, if that makes sense. I felt like they were really trying to build a sustainable conversation around how we can help HBCUs to remove barriers, knowing what capacity looks like, knowing how real turnover is in the space. I mean, because that's a real thing. That's a real thing. And especially now in this space of DEIJ work, PWIs are plucking the Black talent up. And they're not only plucking us up from our institutions, they're paying us extremely well. They're giving us all kinds of benefits. It's hot right now to be Black in higher ed. I mean, and pardon my candor, it's like organizations outside of higher ed, oh, you can be the DI. And I'm like, I'm not trained to do DI work. I just help students remove barriers. And I understand how systematic racism, informs policies. And I mean, but now all of a sudden, like, you could do this DI work. So it's just very interesting what's happening now with Black talent in the HBCU space. And I think, recognizing the limitations and the challenges, but also the rewards, Acadium stepped right in to say, we want to hear from you. Tell us what works. And you don't always find that is the case, especially when you're talking to tech people, because everything for them is just, it's black or white, it works or it doesn't. And I'm like, but there's this nuance that we have to consider, and we ought to, because it's the right thing to do. And this is what it means to be student-centric. So I really feel like I entered a relationship that was genuine. And again, it didn't feel like they were pushing a product, but they were really invested in, policy and practice in a way that best served my students. Partnership versus provider, right on. Yep, that's it. That's it, Jennifer. And they allowed me to switch my hat when I needed to, so I'm gonna put this hat on and then I'm gonna switch to this. And so it really gave me this kind of panoramic view of how to help the students from, finding courses all the way through transcribing grades. Thank you so much for listening and thinking through new ideas. And I'm really privileged to be a part of such a fantastic group.